Howdy, Space Rangers, Captain Phoenix here. Today it's going to be a quick video, probably a short video as well, but I thought I'd get it out there because it's crossed my mind and I honestly think it's something that I would like to see tackled in the future in some shape or form. So jumping right into it, today's video's topic is, will Andor cross over with Rebels, or is there a possibility that the show Andor could cross over with Rebels? Something I realized after I gave off my review of Andor is I realized in the Star Wars timeline, it takes place during another show as well. This show being Rebels. Andor takes place in 5 BBY, that's 5 years before episode 4, and Rebels also roughly takes place around that same time, around 5 to 6 BBY. And we know the rebellion in Rebels doesn't get fully formed, the Rebel Alliance that is, doesn't get fully formed until season 3. So a quick little summary for non-Star Wars fans, the rebellion is the faction that goes up against the Empire in the original trilogy, that is. We have the Empire and then we have the Rebel Alliance that goes against them, thus the whole galactic civil war that we see during the original trilogy. In the show Star Wars Rebels, the show is basically setting up how this rebellion came to be. How did all these different people and decide to build an army to gang up against the Empire and fight for freedom and bring about the Republic once again. And so that's what the TV show Rebels was about. And we get to see how the rebellion grew from small little rebel cells around the galaxy and how they all joined together to form the Rebel Alliance, which, as I said, happens in Rebels Season 3. Andor is also doing that as well, where it shows these different rebel cells or these common people of the galaxy slowly rising up against the Empire to join the rebellion. And both Andor and Rebels actually kind of tackle these two topics, and I just kind of remembered Rebels after I gave off my Andor review. So I was kind of wondering, would they be able to cross over? So here's some reasons why I think it's honestly possible why they might cross over. For one, as I mentioned, they both kind of have the same story. Both are stories about people, especially the normal people of the galaxy, slowly rising up to fight against the Empire. They just have different ways of tackling it. With Rebels, the story was about a young boy who was strong at the Force, not only joining the rebellion but also becoming a Jedi. But with Andor, it's more about this little kid who got into a scuffle with the Republic, and then he grew up in the Empire, and he got to see the flaws of the Empire. Or not only that, but also losing his parent, one of his dad, to the Empire, and then deciding to join the cause against the Empire as well. So different backgrounds, but they still have the same goal, the same end goal for their story. And we also know how both these stories are supposed to end. So I think them conversion at some point in time would also make it really interesting, as we know that both of these stories have similar endings. Rebels ends, I think, a year before episode 4, and Andor is supposed to end right as Rogue One is taking place, which means just as episode 4 is beginning. So while we know their endings, we could have some adventures with them where they could cross over once the rebellion is formed. We know Andor does become a full-on rebel once the series is over, of course, and we know that Ezra and Kanan and the Ghost Crew helped with the formation of the Rebel Alliance. So I do believe that at some point in time these two must have crossed over, considering the Rebel Alliance, it was meant to do was to pull all these rebel cells together and form a great organization, or Rebel Alliance as it were. So I do think that these two stories converging when the Rebel Alliance is officially formed would be really cool. So I mean, yeah, long story short, I do think a reason these two shows could cross over is basically they are both stories that tell of the rebellion's origins. So I really don't see any reason why these two characters wouldn't have met up. These two shows wouldn't have converged or have their characters meet up at some point in time. Or hell, maybe Andor doesn't even need to meet with the Ghost Crew from Rebels. Maybe we could just bring other aspects of Rebels into Andor. For example, we have Mon Mothma, who, yeah, she didn't come from Rebels, but she was a primary character in Rebels. Again, she's a person who helped establish the Rebel Alliance. But what if we don't just need the main characters? What if we could also bring in the villains? A little theory that popped into my mind is, what if Andor, the character himself, becomes such a big enough problem that the Empire will need to send in other guys to deal with him, such as Thrawn? Maybe Deidre won't be able to handle Deidre, or what's the other guy? The other super white guy won't be able to handle Andor on their own, and so maybe they'll need to enlist the help of other superiors in the Empire, such as, again, Grand Admiral Thrawn. Although I do think that this one's a bit far fetched, because Thrawn is such a great character who is known to deal with the Empire's more bigger problems. So him dealing with a low time guy like Andor is kind of unfair if you think about it. It's probably not a fair fight. It's like bringing a little guy or bringing a goon into a boss battle. This would be the equivalent of bringing Palpatine or Vader to deal with Andor. It's kind of silly if you think about it from a meta perspective. But again, still something possible. And honestly, to add on to this, I do think there might be proof that Andor and the Rebels, or at least the Ghost Crew from Rebels, have already met. As shown in Rogue One, a movie which Andor is a main character in, we actually do see connections to Rebels. You could say they're references, but I do feel that they do play a bigger part in the story. For example, here we see Chopper, one of the characters from Rebels, actually at the Yavin 4 base. And even at the Battle of Scarith, Hera and the Ghost can be seen, or at the very least, the Ghost can be seen, and we know Hera is the pilot of the Ghost. And I do believe at some point in time, you could even hear in the background on Yavin 4 base that General Syndulla was being called, meaning that Hera is at Yavin 4 base, and Andor, who's a full-on member of the Rebel Alliance, also works at Yavin 4 base, based on the fact that Rogue One also takes a good chunk of Rogue One takes place on Yavin 4. So we do know that it's very possible they must have come across each other, or at the very least even walked by each other, so to speak. However, I must admit there would also be problems with a crossover, and the biggest of these would be the tone of the two shows. Rebels and Andor are two very different shows with different tones. Rebels is a show that's clearly marketed for kids, while Andor is definitely more geared for adults. So having these two worlds collide would be very weird and would be a very huge task to take on. I'm not saying that the people at Lucasfilm couldn't do this. I'm just saying it would be a lot of work for them to do it. And another thing I think would be a problem with Andor crossing over with another Star Wars property is that fans would definitely complain about yet another Star Wars show needing cameos to survive or to be relevant. And Andor fans couldn't have that happening to their precious Andor. Oh no! Andor crossing over with other Star Wars properties? Please don't say it so. But overall, I don't think there might be too many problems with them having a crossover. It's honestly kind of inconsequential to the overall Star Wars thing, if you ask me. Plus, literally every other Star Wars material has had crossovers with each other. So, now that the possibility of a crossover is not only really high, but also most likely, how do I predict slash think the crossover could work or should work? Well, for one, I'd love it if Andor ran or bumped into Kanan and Ezra. If we're going for quick cameos, then we could just have them in their iconic outfits, or we could have someone call them by their name for attention off screen or something, and they need to go deal with that problem and be done with it. That's it. We don't need to add any more to it. We could just say, hey, here's Kanan, here's Ezra, boom, we're done. Move on with the story. That would be a quick cameo, and I think that would be serviceable enough. But if we're going for an episode long appearance, then I could say it would be a really cool plot if the Ghost crew and Andor went on a heist together, and we could just kind of have fun with it, sort of like the way Solo was just having fun with its heist. And honestly, it would be more than we deserve. But something I do not want is a season-long team-up. I really do not want to have Kanan or Ezra or whoever else from the other show's cast outshine Cassian or them taking the helm on this show. We do not need another Book of Boba Fett. Please, don't give us like Rebel Season 2.5. We don't need that nonsense in here. Still keep the focus on Cassian Andor himself, but I would like it if, the Ghost crew were like backup characters. Not really background, because background characters still kind of have things to do in the plot, but more like they're kind of here, but they wouldn't make it to the poster, if you know what I'm saying. Now, with all that being said, the most realistic use of these characters I think they'll do would be Hera herself. I don't think they're gonna delve too much into using Kanan, Ezra, Sabine, or even Garazeb. I think mostly they're gonna focus on Hera, for quite a few simple reasons. As said, the Ghost was at the Battle of Scarith, and since that takes place after the Rebels' finale, it's reasonable to assume that Hera would be one of the only few members left. Think about it, as of that point in time, Kanan is dead, Ezra has disappeared, Sabine has most likely stayed on Lothal to watch guard for Ezra, to watch guard over the planet for Ezra. Zeb could still be around, but it's hard to pinpoint when he and Kallus went to go look for a new home for the Zabraks, so that could have happened either before or after the original trilogy, so it's kind of a 50-50 with him. But one thing that would be 100% certain is that Rex would be around. Yes, Rex, the clone from Clone Wars, would be around with Hera during the Battle of Scarith, Rogue One, and the original trilogy, because you also know Rex shows up at the Battle of Endor, meaning he and Hera do spend a lot of time together during that period of time, and so seeing a live-action version of Rex would definitely be a treat if they were to go in that direction. Another reason why I think they would pick only Hera is that my guess is, since Andor is clearly disassociating itself from the Force and the Jedi, it would make sense if it set it intertwining with Rebels after its finale, when the two main Jedi are gone. Because after the Rebels finale, there wouldn't be two random Jedi there to confuse audiences even further. So I think them just focusing on the non-Force part of the crew would be cool. Especially, again, if Sabine also isn't there, because we really don't need another Mandalorian here to mess things up and people start complaining, oh my gosh, the Mandalorian is starting to take over all the Star Wars projects. And honestly, I'd still be down for an Andor, Hera, and Rex season-long adventure that leads up to the events of Rogue One. If the three of them actually do have common crossovers with each other, and they do start to build a bond leading up to Rogue One, it would be a really interesting story for them to tackle. Of course, their bond couldn't be too strong, otherwise now people would start questioning why Hera didn't join Andor and Jyn Erso when they went to Scarif on their own. So yeah, I do think a crossover is possible, if not expected, and it'd probably be for a short amount of time, or quick cameo if Ezra and Kanan are involved, or it could be an arc long if it takes place in between Rebel Season 4 and Rogue One, with Hera, Rex, Andor, and the like. Oh, and honestly, I do think that the more you think about this, the more plausible it is, because remember, Disney already has live-action castings for Ezra, Sabine, and possibly Thrawn, so having them also show up in Andor is really not too far-fetched if you think about it for more than just a second. But hey, that's just a theory. A film! I can't even finish that joke. Anyways, guys, thank you so very much for watching this video. Again, it's a very short video, but I did think it was pretty cool if it would be pretty cool if Andor actually did crossover with Rebels. I know right now Andor fans, the last thing they want is for cameos and crossovers with other Star Wars shows. But right now, I do think, honestly, it would be pretty cool if towards the show's end, we did start catching up with the Rebel Alliance and the characters from Rebels. Not to mention, in Rebel Season 3, Mon Mothma does give her big speech that joins the Rebel cells across the galaxy together. She gives a big speech that basically announces to the galaxy that the Rebel Alliance is alive and it's well, and they're here to take on the Empire. So having this scene possibly brought to live action in Andor, or basically adding to Mon Mothma's character, would be really interesting. It would also be a nice way to wrap up her arc and story that started in Andor and then sort of gets concluded towards in Rebels. I do think it would be a really nice way to tie these two shows together. Again, I don't know how they're gonna go about this, but I do think that this speech, or the very least the declaration of the Rebel Alliance, would be a very cool and interesting thing for them to tackle, and it would be honestly missed potential if they don't do it. I mean, at the very least, it would be good character development for Mon Mothma herself. But anyways, guys, that's gonna do it for today. Please leave me down below your thoughts. Do you think Andor should have crossover with Rebels? And if you don't, tell me why. If you do, tell me how you think they should go about it, and whether or not it would be a smart decision. Again, I know these two shows have completely different tones, but they are talking about the origins of the Rebel Alliance. So I do think it would be important for them to at least acknowledge each other's existence at the very least, you know? Without further ado, thank you guys so very much for watching. Now we're in December. This is a crazy month for my channel. Lots of crazy uploads are gonna come soon, so buckle up, guys. We're in for a wild ride. Anyways, thank you so very much for watching. I've been Captain Phoenix, and with that, I will see you in another universe. Goodbye, my Rangers.